So you're thinking of buying a home, but you don't know how to get started. Hi everyone, my name is Marilie Daniels. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Florida Network Realty.
Hi, I'm Courtney Carson. I'm a loan officer with Academy Mortgage here in Jacksonville, Florida.
And I'm Eric Carson, a loan officer with Academy Mortgage in Jacksonville, Florida. But we also serve Georgia as well as our home state of Missouri. Obviously, we live in Jacksonville, so we love to serve our Jacksonville clients. But especially being just a few miles away from Georgia, we also serve that area as well. And then, of course, our friends and family, and of course, they know people in Missouri. So we love to help. Why I say go back home and help those that we grew up to school with, played on the playground with, and again help them realize the dream of home ownership.
All right, so I have a lot of questions.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it's I appreciate it because I don't know if probably Courtney remembers as well. Obviously you were there, but we bought our first home when we were in our early 20s. The average first-time home buyer right now is age of 33. We didn't have a lot of money. We were both, we didn't have a huge gift, which is fine. Right. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But as far as if I reflect back to our first home, we didn't know. We didn't have the internet. Mm-hmm. I think we had dial-up.
You're aging us now.
Yeah, I know. We're not that young. But so back to you saying being available for the first-time home buyer. That's where it really drives kind of the core of what we do, because I reflect back just a few years ago when we bought our home, and we didn't have direction. We didn't have, immediate answers. And so I remember that. So if we get a call or an email late at night, we can tell kind of the tone. Are they stressed out, or is it just a general question? And that because I don't want them going to sleep at night concerned about what am I going to do? Is this even a possibility? So,
All right, so let's get started. The number one question that I have is, what is the definition of a first-time home buyer?
Sure. So a first-time home buyer is really someone who hasn't owned a home in the last 3 years. There are some exceptions to that, such as if you were married and you owned a home with that spouse, but then you are now divorced, you can be a first-time home buyer. So it really just depends. It's best, when in doubt, to talk to the lender and see if you are considered a first-time home buyer.
But Marilie, just to make a note, 43% of home buyers are first time. They've never purchased a home before. So it's a big chunk of the market. So again, they're not alone. There's many more first time home buyers out there that are walking the same path or doing the same, getting their finances in order. So again, they're not alone.
All right, that is very well said. All right, so let's move on to number 2. Am I ready to buy a home? Can I afford a home?
So that's obviously a question we get on a regular basis. So everyone knows Dave Ramsey of The Ramsey Show. He's kind of the financial guru. Yeah. And so, the truth, he always says, the truth about buying a home is buy it when you are ready. Not if your family, say you're living with your family, which a lot of younger generation are living with their family and they're trying to, kick you out or something like that. Not, not taking the hint, but when you're ready. Not because you think the market's going to crash and maybe you're stepping away from it and you think the market's going to crash, which Dave says it's not, and many other analysts say it's not. The truth is you're ready to buy a home when you're financially ready. We get asked a lot of questions about that, but we also ask the customer a lot of questions, especially when they're a first-time home buyer. And some of them may be hard to answer, depending, because we are diving in, one, to their credit, and obviously their purchasing history. Also, have they been saving? So some of the questions we ask are, have you been paying your bills? Again, very simple, but some of the answers we've gotten, well, I missed that payment because it was only $10, but I'll pick it up. Well, that does impact your credit. Also, do you have a reserve fund? Can you pay your bills for 3 to 6 months? If you were to lose your job, do you have expenses to cover with moving, or to rent a U-Haul or so forth? Some utilities require deposits. Do you have funds with that to pay those deposits? So again, it's just not being able to make the payment, but it's also, can you afford the down payment and closing costs? And we'll get into that here a little bit later, what that involves and maybe some ways to offset those costs. But that's kind of the first set of questions that we talk about. Are you financially ready? Now, there are times where after we talk with the customer, their answer may be no. And we always say, if your goal is to own a home, the answer may be no, but it may be not right now. Right. And that could be 1 month from now. It could be 6 months from now. I remember we were working with a single mom in Georgia, and I remember she called me in a February, and she's like, listen, Eric, I will do whatever I can. My goal is to own a home before the end of the year. And I said, okay, so let's take a look at your application, and we will come up with a plan. And she was not ready at that time, which is fine. But we put a plan together. We talked to her every month. Hey, how are things going? By September, we closed on her very first home. And I remember calling her on the phone saying, hey, you are cleared to close. And there was this silence.
That gives me goosebumps.
And
she worked hard.
She worked very hard. Yeah. And so I always say, if the answer is no today, that doesn't mean no forever. And again, it could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be 3 months. Right. Again, we, as you mentioned earlier, we are here to help guide and help walk along with you on those next steps towards home ownership.
With me as a realtor now, my advice would be really to make sure to get in touch with the lender first and find out first what you can qualify. Or, we're going to dive in with a pre-qualification and pre-approval as we go along. But I think that is the very first question every first-time home buyer should ask. Are you ready financially to own a home? Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think one of the myths out there is one that you have to be older to buy a home. And obviously the stats are showing that the average age of 33 is a first-time home buyer, but you don't have to. And we'll talk about the qualifications, but the younger generation can buy a home. We've seen it firsthand. We've seen someone that's an hourly wage worker right out of high school. She worked for 2 years, saved her money. She did not take any, she saved everything and she bought a home. So when we're working with those first-time home buyers that are younger, we're like, we've seen it and we know it can happen. And again, we share those stories that obviously are de-identified to give hope that it is possible. So that's one myth, that, the younger generation cannot afford a home. The next myth is you need a huge down payment, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So again, we also want to kind of debunk some of these myths as well and encourage.
So let's go to number 3. How much money does it take to buy a home? This is very interesting.
Sure. So essentially, there's 2 big parts to be ready to buy a home. So we need down payment and you need closing costs, money for closing costs. So for your down payment, it really depends on the loan program. It can be a conventional down payment would be as low as 3% for some. For FHA, it can be as low as 3.5% down payment. And then there's programs like a VA and a USDA where there is possible 0 down payment. So those are great programs. So it all depends on the customer and what they can do. And then for closing costs, these are just the cost of doing the loan, of all the fees and things that have to be paid for doing the mortgage. So
like title
work,
insurance,
appraisal, attorney fees, all those things, transfer taxes, all the good things that we have to pay when we buy a home. So those are part of the closing costs. So those 2 things are the things that you need to have ready when you purchase a home. So if you don't have enough money right off the bat for down payment and closing cost, there's some options to look at. One is a gift from family members. They can give you money to go towards your down payment. A lot of people forget that. There's also, depending on the market, you work with your lovely real estate agent and to negotiate some seller concessions so the seller can pay towards closing costs. There's lender credits that are available. And then there's also...
But not to interrupt though, sorry. But lender credits, my mom was a math teacher and she went to this economics seminar and she had this shirt that said 10 Stoffel. I'm like, what's Tanstoffel? And she's like, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And so one of the
Basic
things
economic principle.
right. And so again, if there's money out there to grab for home buyers, I'm all about it. But I always say, let's look at it, because sometimes lender credits, it's in exchange for a higher interest rate, and every lender is a little bit different. So I always say, whoever you're working with as a lender, hopefully it's obviously us, but whoever you're working with it as a lender, compare and make sure that, yes, you're getting, say, a $5,000 lender credit, but it's not in exchange for a higher rate. So again, always look at the bottom line, but those are some excellent, gifts, seller concessions, lender credits, and then
there's also down payment assistance programs out there, state programs and local programs, and that's just important to talk to the lender to see if you qualify for those.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So number 4, how long does it take to buy a home?
Great question. Common question. National average for closing on a home for a conventional mortgage
You're
last year.
going to be surprised. Believe it or not, we just pulled these stats.
This was a surprise to us. So nationally, the average for all lenders for a conventional mortgage last year was 57 days.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. For FHA, more involved mortgages, it was 62 days last year for average, nationally.
A lot of the government-backed loans.
Yeah.
And I think, too, as far as those, the appraisals take a little bit longer and so forth like that.
More steps to it. Typically, though, for us, once you find a property, and have a contract in place, it can take around 30 days, is a good average. We've seen it as low as 15. Now, we don't promise that.
Don't hold us to that.
The main thing these things depend on is getting documents to the lender in a very timely fashion, getting what they need, and also that there's no issue with appraisal and inspection. So that can help make things go smooth.
Because I remember we worked with 2 buyers and we were aiming for 30-day close, but you were able to make it, like, what was that, 21 or 25 days? So that was really awesome.
And I think, and Courtney mentioned it was, and I remember the customer, it was, hey, I send a list, call him on the phone, this is what we need. And I mean, but before I even hung up the phone, he's like, here you go. And that's, again, we know there's people work and have to, especially if they're relocating, sometimes most of the documents are electronic, but again, we understand, but within 24 hours, if you can get us those documents, a lot of times through us, you can upload those to the online portal on your phone. You can use your phone to take a picture of the document, but especially timely submission of those documents are going to speed up the front end of the process so we can get it directly into underwriting. And then we're just waiting for the title to clear and the appraisal to get back. And I always say, I'd rather you be concerned about what you're going to paint the kitchen versus whether the loan's going to close.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So we're moving on to number 5. What type of credit score do I need? My credit doesn't look good. What do you recommend? This is a very difficult question.
It is.
Popular question.
I mean, outside of if I can afford a home, then it's, well, I have bad credit, or I don't know, what do I need? And so, credit scores range from 300 to 850. And obviously, the higher the score, the better your interest rate could be, depending on certain factors. But again, the better the score, the better options that are available to you. I wouldn't say there's a low score, because there are some lenders and brokers we work with that offer programs down to a 500 credit score. Right. On average, we like to see a 640. The reason why is, especially here in Florida, most of our state down payment assistance programs, you have to have a minimum of a credit score of a 640. Okay. So that's one of the, I would say, a minimum requirement. However,
there's always a however.
There's always a however. And again, I'm always trying to think of how do we get you where you need to be. So let's say you're below a 640. Let's just say you're at a 510. That's okay. You have to know where you are currently.
To know where you want to go.
Exactly. And so the first step is to apply. Part of the application process is for us to take a look at your credit. Now, when I pull credit, or when you pull credit, the common question is, well, I have Credit Karma, or I have on my bank, and in which those are great resources, again, because you're in tune of what's going on with your credit. what I will say is they have a different modeling system than what the mortgage score is.
Okay.
So understand that your score, if you call us and one of the questions we will have is, do you have Credit Karma? Do you have any credit monitoring? Most of the times it's, yeah, I got Credit Karma. I'm looking at it right now. My Credit Karma is 700. On average, which great, good score. On average, I will say, once you apply, we pull your credit. There's a good chance you may be 40 to 60 points less. I'm just warning you. Again, based on our experience, it could be that less. And that's okay because, again, different modeling system than those. So I always let them know of that. And then there have been the abnormal times where I come back and it's exactly what they said, which is a good problem to have. But let's just say, let's go back to the 500 credit score scenario. So we pull in, it's 500 credit score. We will call them on the phone and we'll say, hey, listen, this is the score. We will look at their credit. We'll see, late payments. Are there any bankruptcies? Have they been, trying to get every credit card offer out there and applying for all these offers?
So
again,
all these inquiries for credit.
Right, inquiries, hurt your credit. But then what we do is we have the technology then to forecast. Again, it's not a guarantee, but it's a forecast of what you could have if you pay down your debt, if you allow the seasoning from your inquiries to go 6 months, 12 months from now, and what it could be. And there was one customer we helped recently. They were in the low 500s, and we came up, again, it's back to come up with a plan. If your goal is home ownership, and you're bound and determined to buy a home,
if you're willing to do the work,
Right.
then we will help you. And just like you, I know you will help. If your dream is home ownership, we will help you.
Yeah.
And so we came up with a plan, and she was on it. Boom, boom, boom. Within, I think, a month,
ish, yeah.
we went from a 500 to a 620.
Wow.
And so that dramatically changed the amount of down payment required by the investor we were using. It changed the interest rate. And again, just some slight changes. And so every customer is different, every scenario is different. And so it's about sitting down with the customer, understanding where they are currently, again, and trying to bring them to where they need to be. And again, it's an education process.
Credit, it's an interesting algorithm and how it's all figured. We've learned a lot too, just looking at people's reports and what it takes to get it boosted.
And one of the things that we are sensitive about is I remember a phone call that I had to make. And the customer applied, and it wasn't a terrible score, but it was lower than 800. Again, people get very competitive. Even I've had where husband and wives have been saying, well,
what's my score? What's my score?
Exactly. And so, healthy competition is fine, but the score was a little bit lower than
expected.
Right. And there was some hesitation and frustration, I could tell. And as we talked further, her identity had been stolen. And it was a very sad time for her. And so as a loan officer, as we know, everything is very sensitive. It can bring up bad memories. It can bring up, well, I had to spend 6 hours on the phone with the credit bureaus because someone stole my identity. And so it's being sensitive, it's trying to pick up those cues.
Or divorces and things like that, where you're still tied to certain debts. You have to be sensitive.
Again, and I think that's why we connected early on, is this isn't just a job for us. It's our passion to go back to pulling in that driveway in Kansas City and seeing that home with a for sale sign saying, we want that home. How do we get there? And knowing that there are more people out there just like us, whether married or single or divorced, whatever your stage of life is, we're there to help. And I think, working with you, and you see how we interact, and even just, there are times where, maybe they decide to go with a different lender. But then we get the phone call after they're already working. Hey, Eric, would you take a look at this? And I'm like,
We're happy to. Yeah, we're happy
I
to.
remember that. Yeah.
Because we want to make sure they're taken care of.
Right.
Regardless.
Right. And, in that situation, it was with a builder and the reason they're lender, they get all these credits. I'm like, you need to take the deal because, but I'll be here and Courtney will be there. And so, but anyway, that's as far as with credit, don't allow a low credit score to prohibit you from applying. Even if you know that your credit's low, it is important to work with a team that has the ability to help guide and prescribe next steps. Again, it's about that if your goal is home ownership and you have a passion to be a homeowner and everything that comes with it, we are there with you and we will help figure out a solution.
With the credit score, that alone is already a sensitive information to most of the home buyers that I've talked to. They're concerned about, first of all, the credit score. Like, who are these people that I can just entrust my finances, my financial condition? For me, it goes back to the point where, like, how committed the lenders are to help you guide from day one to the closing table and even beyond that.
And I would say too, one question I would say that we get almost with every phone call is, what's this going to do to my credit when you pull my credit?
Good point.
So I don't know if you want to kind of talk what we tell that
No,
those customers.
No, you're absolutely right. So when you're applying for a mortgage, you have 30 days to basically what we say, you can go out and shop for other mortgages. You can have them pull your credit. It is not going to impact your credit like you think it would. It shouldn't impact it at all. At most, we've been told by some of the credit specialists out there, 3 to 5 points. But I do want, especially first-time home buyers, to hear, if you go out, I would love to work with you. Courtney would love to work with you. But it's okay if you apply with another lender. And the reason why is I had a first-time home buyer call me, referred to us by their realtor, and she was scared to talk to me. And I said, well, why? And she's like, I'm working with another organization, and they said that if I talk to another lender or apply with another lender, it's going to affect my qualification. I'm not going to be able to buy a home, and I want to buy a home. If you are a first-time home buyer looking to purchase a home and you've already talked to another lender, but your realtor said, hey, listen, would you reach out to my lender and get a second opinion, if you will? It's okay. It's not going to impact your qualification. Now, if you're outside of the 30-day, if you applied with them more than 30 days ago, it could maybe change your score, what we've been told, 3 to 5 points. But it's okay, because it's possible the guidance that we receive from that lender, it could, even though it would impact your credit 3 to 5 points, what they tell you and the options and the programs they offer, it could be worth it. But in general, it's okay to talk to other lenders, even though we don't want you to. It's okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think it's just really going to hurt their credit score.
Right. I heard that a lot of times we're like, we don't want to have any more second opinion because we want to make sure that our credit score is not going to be affected.
So again,
Right.
that's with mortgage credit pulls.
Right. Right. So again, you can have multiple mortgage credit pulls within a 30-day. Now, just be careful going out and trying to get those.
Get a new credit card.
Yeah, those free flights, and you keep applying.
That's different.
Right.
All right, so that is very informative. Let's go to the next question. What do I need to qualify for a loan? Again, this is a very interesting question, especially for the first-time home buyers.
Sure.
This is a 2-part video. This is the first one, and we'll have the next one in the next post.